So, good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you very much for being here at 8:30 in the morning, because I certainly was, out fairly late last night. So, brilliant. I'm really pleased you're all here. One question, first of all, how many law enforcement officials are here? So, there's a couple. Okay. So, as I say, I'm Craig Jones. I'm a Director of Cybercrime at Interpol. I'm going to talk a little bit about Interpol and what Interpol's role is in that global security architecture. I'm then going to also talk about our global cybercrime program and why we have a global cybercrime program. And what qualifies me to stand here, because I never imagined back in 1990 when I put my hat on to go and patrol the streets that I would one day be a director at Interpol leading a global program. So how did I get here? Why did I get here? What's also the future as well for law enforcement globally? What's that policing model look like? Because we police in a local environment. We come from our communities, we police in our communities, and we're used to those interactions, those face-to-face interactions. Whereas all of a sudden now, this cybersecurity, cybercrime piece, and all that online policing has been handed over to us. Well, in 1990, I had no idea of doing that. In 1983, I was in the Navy, and I was in communications. And my experience in communications then was that between 8 o'clock and midnight, I used to wire these little boxes up, put them in a slot, and at midnight, when we flipped over, I hope that comes out in clear English now, not in gobbledygook. And that was the sort of thing where we were there. And where are we now? You know, it's all seamless, basically. But is that policing model seamless? Are we able to police in this environment? Disclaimer, Interpol. So Interpol is made up of 196 member countries. It's over 100 years old. We celebrated our 100th anniversary last year in Austria, where we were born. If you were to try and create Interpol today, you wouldn't. And especially at this moment in time, and we'll look at that in a little while. But the way we work is every country has a national central bureau. So as Interpol, there's about 1,500 of us. Our headquarters are over here in Lyon, and I'm based down here somewhere in Singapore. So we have the globe. We have an office, we have secure systems and networks which we can transfer information and data. The staff of Interpol are made up of seconded officials such as me. So my home agency is the National Crime Agency in the United Kingdom, and I was a senior law enforcement, well, I still am a senior official there, and I was in their National Cybercrime Unit. So prior to coming to Interpol, I was building out capabilities for cyber from about 2012, 2013. We went through a whole process in the UK where, you've got to police this, how are we going to do it? So the UK produced a national security strategy. Cyber was deemed as a tier 1 risk to the country. Now, I do like a nice strategy now and then. If you read them, there's ways to get money out of them effectively. So tier 1 risk, what do we then do about that? So we put a whole plan. The US last year just redid their national cyber strategy, and there was an implementation plan. There's going to be an international element to that as well. So a lot of countries are going through their second and third iterations now of those strategies. But you need a program to enact that strategy. So as Interpol, seconded officials, contract staff, we have duty stations around the world as well. We have 4 regional bureaus in Africa, and that's really important to our cybercrime program, and I'll come on to that in a bit. We have a regional bureau down there in Buenos Aires, and we're also potentially soon going to have a regional bureau in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And that's where we can be placed as law enforcement officials for Interpol. We have to work in a duty station. Why are we in Singapore? Why would Interpol place something in Singapore? Well, as I said, we were formed over 100 years ago, and it was mainly European countries that formed Interpol to start with. And I think it's a fair challenge to say that sometimes Interpol is still seen as a sort of Western-leaning organization. So back in about 2010, we had a president of Interpol who said, and he was from Singapore, he said, right, we will build you a centre in Singapore. And I remember reading a paper back in 2012 when I was building some of the capabilities in the UK and thought, wow, that sounds amazing, Singapore. When you sat in London on a horrible, wet, miserable afternoon and you're reading about Singapore, it sounds quite interesting. But actually, it was inspired because in Singapore, the connectivity there is phenomenal. I don't just mean the buses that they have, because they're really good, but just in terms of the tech and the finance. So you have all the big tech companies have their regional headquarters there, or at least some presence there. All of the banking network are there as well. So in terms of planning that out 10 years ago, when I'm in Singapore now, and I'm able to just jump on a bus, go down to Microsoft headquarters there, and have the APAC CISOs meeting with Microsoft, and I don't have to fly 13 hours across somewhere else, it's ideal for us. So that's that connectivity, effectively. So 2015, the centre opened. We have 3 crime programs to start with. So we have cybercrime, counter-terrorism, and organised emerging crime. So anything that wasn't cyber or counter-terrorism went in organised and emerging crime. And last year, we now have the financial crimes director as well. So we have a 4th programme, effectively. We have a Secretary General, Jürgen Stock. This year is a big year for Interpol. It's a bit like the United Nations. We have elections, and we'll have a new Secretary General elected. And that Secretary General sort of sets the direction for the organisation. Over the last 5 years, we've become more operationally focused. So I cannot lead an investigation. I can coordinate, I can support, I can help facilitate those operations, but I can't directly tell a country what to do. Now, Interpol is a neutral organisation. We have a constitution, we have the different articles. Our Article 3 precludes us from being involved in anything that's political, military, racist, or religious. So we can only deal in crime. So our mandate is very, very clear. And I'll give a couple of examples in a bit about where that's worked really well, but also maybe where it's had some challenges for us as well. But coming back to Interpol, and I said, if we try to create Interpol today, would we be able to create it? And the answer is no. Where we are now and where we've been over the last X amount of years, we police in the community through trust. So in the local community, patrolling, we have that police to community relationship. At Interpol, we have 196 countries. So we have to navigate with 196 countries effectively. So in terms of how we do that on the crime programs, we have to set out very, very clear programs. So we have to have mandates, we have to have objectives, we have to have outcomes, all that program management stuff, which again, when I started in the police, I never thought I'd be a program or project manager, but I've done the courses now, I'm now a program manager. So this is what we look like, and this is the slide I'm going to spend a bit of time talking around, and this will give you an idea of what we do and why we do it. So our global program, that's our mandate. And every word in there has been chosen very, very carefully. That wasn't just sit down, write something out, there we go, that's where we're going to do it. So when we talk about crime, we're talking about reducing. Have we stopped crime? No. Are we going to stop cybercrime? No. So what we have to look at is how do we reduce it? As Interpol, we've got a global mandate. We look at the impact and cybercrime. What's the definition of cybercrime? Because I'm sure if I went around the room and asked, what's your definition of cybercrime? We will get lots of different examples of that. And I'll cover a little bit about that in a moment. The role of police is to protect communities. So that's our role. Our role there is to keep our communities safe and safer world. My mum is 89 years old. She has a phone in her house which is plugged into the wall. If it rings, she has to walk down the stairs into the dining room, pick the phone up and say hello. She's never logged on, not even touched a computer in her life, thankfully. However, she's now been a victim constantly of cybercrime. Last year, we had a water shortage in the UK. No water for her. We got to put on the local water board system as a vulnerable person so we could get her water. That water board then had a data breach. They took the data, they had my mum's information, vulnerable, elderly, here's a phone number. She was getting about 20 phone calls a day at one stage from the criminals, trying to con her, scam her. Luckily, her phone line's a bit crackly and her hearing's a bit bad, so she's normally just putting the phone down. It's a little bit difficult when I phone her from Singapore and try and have a conversation. I'm not going to talk to you, you're scamming me, and puts the phone down. But just in terms of the crime, we get quite hung up sometimes in this technical side of it, and the company's been impacted. But these are real people that the criminals are impacting now, and that volume and scale of that. And when you're trying to address that on a global basis, how do you effectively do it? So in Singapore, we have a team of about 80. We have a vacancy rate roughly 18 to 20%, because it takes time to fill the positions. We have to get the countries to agree to second their officials in, but then we have to make sure that they are competent, that they have the skill sets that we need as well, whether it's as an operations coordinator, whether it's an intel analyst, whether it's a researcher. We have 3 areas that we work in. So the first one is cybercrime threat response. We have cybercrime operations, and then cyber strategy and capabilities development. You notice I don't have the word crime on the end of that, because that allows me to do some other things effectively that we can move into other areas. When people talk about cyber, we can move into those areas as well. And there's some whole pieces of work going on at the United Nations at the moment where by not having crime on there has really aided us to be able to get into these processes. So we divide the world up. And the triangle there sort of demonstrates there's 196 countries in that triangle, and probably there's about 30 to 40 countries that have got great capabilities in their country. They can run a full investigation, they can do everything that needs to be done, and they can work very, very effectively together in that trust model with certain countries. But also in their 30, 40 countries are countries that are not going to speak to each other. So as Interpol, our role should then be a neutral interlocker. So what we do then is we come in and say to those countries, hey, you've unsealed that indictment on these 3 Iranian cyber criminals. You've been very clear in your language. They're cyber criminals. They've been committing crimes all around the world, and also that you've been committing crimes in their own country as well. We can then take that operation investigation and go to that country and say, what are you doing? How are you reducing the global impact of cybercrime? If you have criminals in your country, are you going to prosecute them? How are we going to disrupt those criminals in that country? We then have a number of countries here that have probably got reasonable capability capacity, and what we do there is we feed them information and data. So we look in their countries and say, okay, where are the victims, where are the threat actors, where are the infrastructure in that country? So then through our cybercrime threat response, we aggregate those data sets, we then share that information into those countries, and we offer to help support and coordinate those operations with them and for them. Sometimes they're very, very receptive, sometimes they're not so receptive, but we're going in on a single country at times. Now that's not really effective. That's not the best use of our resources. So we have a regional model that we do as well. And the final part here is those countries that really don't have any capabilities at all. They have no capacity. So in terms of how we work, we look to prevent, detect, investigate, and disrupt cybercrime. So under each of those parts, we say, right, in these countries, we want to prevent. So we want to be able to give them information. We want to help them build out their capabilities. We want to ensure they're working effectively in their countries with other agencies as well. So again, a lot of sort of projects go into that area to help develop their capabilities. So in terms of how we deliver this, we deliver it through cybercrime operations. So Africa, 2019, we sat in a classroom in Nairobi It was my first meeting as the director in one of our regional working groups. So Interpol is divided up into 4 Americas, Europe, Africa, Asia, and South Pacific. So we sat in this classroom, there was about 14 of us. And it was an absolutely eye-opening meeting for me, because I'd come from the UK, we had funding, post WannaCry, we got more funding as well for law enforcement, we had the nice tools, we had the bells, the whistles, everything. And then you sat in a classroom with one person who's the head of a national cybercrime unit, and that's the only person that's doing cyber in that country. Where do you start? When we went around the table and heard about what they were doing, one of them, I think it was Sierra Leone, said, yes, we went to a house. We thought there was human trafficking going on. We went through the door, and it was an online farm. We had no idea what to do with it. And that was just before COVID. And I heard that story, but I didn't really follow that through at that time. And what we're seeing now, and I'm just jumping ahead a little bit here, is post-COVID, we're seeing criminal groups recruiting people in India and other such places, offering them jobs out in Southeast Asia. They're going over. Once they get to the airport, they're having the passports taken off them, or they've been taken to a hotel, passports taken off them, and then they're trafficked. And they're put into these online criminal call centers effectively. So that was going on in 2019. 2024, the criminals are industrializing this. So it's like any business, they need talent. So in order to have these criminal operations working, they're recruiting and taking people out of countries and then keeping them held, basically. So Indonesia have just done a whole bunch of operations, Vietnam as well, where they've broken up a load of these operations. So when we talk about, as I said, cyber crime, there is always that human element to it as well, effectively. But coming back to Africa, what could we do? So the UK strategy at the time was to make the UK the safest place to live and work online. I still remember that now. But one of the things in our first strategy that we did as law enforcement, we were judged on how many arrests we made in the UK. But we were saying, well, a lot of the cyber criminals are not in the UK. So how does one country then work across the globe? So one way of doing it is through regional policing bodies such as Europol, such as Ameripol, Afropol, and others. Another way is through Interpol. So we put forward a proposal to set up regional desks in our 4 regions, effectively, and we managed to secure funding from the United Kingdom to set up a desk. And by a desk, what I mean there is we have some people working in our cybercrime threat response in Singapore on the Intel side, looking at Africa. We then have our staff based in our 4 regional bureaus, so we have seconded officials and contract staff. Looking at my triangle here, we're helping to build those capabilities. We used to do a lot of our operations with them on Gmail and WhatsApp. So how did we know we were actually dealing with law enforcement officials? So we've now built platforms for them, so they can come in, basically a secure HTTPS platform. We have workspaces on there, and we're able to put data sets on those platforms. In 2022, in Rwanda, we had our next working group meeting. We had 35 countries present, heads of cybercrime. We ran training at the same time for some of their teams. We built a framework out for them, which they'd all signed up to. We had another project going as Interpol, as the Interpol support program to the Africa Union. So it was an overarching project across Africa, and cybercrime was one element of that. And as a program manager, you're trying to bring all those different projects together. So we brought some of their staff into Singapore or put them into Africa. But again, like any large organizations, quite often we work in those silos. And it becomes very challenging at times, because especially when you're chasing the money. So, we rely on our member countries' contributions. That's what keeps us funded. And our contributions can be in the terms of the funding each year. So that's our model. Seconded officials, or paying for projects as well. But it's quite competitive in this space. Last week I was in Nigeria, in Abuja, and we had our 10th Africa Working Group meeting. So we had the private partners there, we had 49 countries there this time, it was 5 days, and we went through, a bit like any conference, the talking, the sharing, but towards the end of that, we went into operational planning. So what we were able to do is take operations to them, and some of the operations we were doing, such as compromised infrastructure and ISPs. You know, how does a police officer deal with that? Well, actually, we broke it down per country. We looked at the ISPs, we looked at compromised infrastructure, we looked at the legislation in that country, or we looked at the terms and conditions. Because remember, we're preventing, detecting, investigating, or disrupting. So what's that model? How do we break up that criminal infrastructure? But also, when we're doing these sort of operations, we've got to be very careful we're not sort of breaking the internet as well. Because I know historically the police, when there's been a data breach or something like that, and I'm guilty, we went along to the companies, we said, right, we need everything, pull everything out. Basically, we broke the companies because we were doing our police investigation, because we were using our traditional policing methods of gathering the evidence. So that sort of ties in a little bit into what is that policing model now? Is it about locking the criminals up? Is it about that deterrent? Yes. But actually, there's other ways that we can do it. How do we use the technology more effectively to prevent or disrupt? In terms of Interpol, historically, we do a lot of capacity building. And I've got a bit of a definition thing here. What's capacity versus a capability? So for me, I have a glass of water here, and the capacity of that is the amount, that's the volume. The capability in there as water, if it's full, that quenches my thirst, and that's that capability. But if it's whiskey, not that I'm a whiskey drinker, that capability can be a lot smaller, but can have a lot more impact. So understanding the difference between a capability and a capacity for us is really, really important. Because as law enforcement, we do like a nice training course. We do like a nice certificate. We do like that Friday afternoon certificate, tea and biscuits, and away you go. The way we've moved that now is when we do a training, it comes with an operation. And we'll provide the training to the countries, especially down here in this area, the red area, because they don't have those capabilities, and we want to increase their capacity to deal with cybercrime. Mr. Uche is the head of cybercrime in Nigeria. And just to give you a bit of background about Nigeria, there's a lot of cyber criminals there. There's a lot. And we've worked with our private partners, so we're able to receive data sets from private entities such as Cisco, Fortinet, Palo Alto, Group IB, Bizone, because they see the criminal networks. They have the data, we don't. We're able to bring that data into Interpol under our rules of processing data, which is a great big book about that thing. Anybody here from Europe? GDPR? Yeah, it's bigger than GDPR, our rules of processing data. But that gives us those rules that we have to follow. So it's a bit like if we receive police information, let's just say from Argentina, sends information into us at Interpol, that data set always belongs to Argentina. They can stipulate what we do with that data. They can say who we can share that data with. With our private partners, if they're a US-based private partner, and we receive data from them, we have to go through and see, well, which countries are sanctioned, because we may not be able to then share that data as part of our investigation into certain countries. So there's lots of different parts to this that we all have to consider. We can do a better job on it, absolutely. So when you look at the UK have just taken down Lockbit, really good example. My home agency's done that. So I knock on the door. Hello, home agency. How can we assist? Thank you very much, Craig. We're pretty good at the moment. We're working really hard. We've got a lot of data, and we'll come back to you. Okay. Knock, knock. Hello, still here. How can we help you? Oh, no, we're going through it all. We're doing X, Y, and Z effectively. And you saw the news yesterday about the sanctions from someone in Russia. So tomorrow I'll be going knock, knock. How can we help you? We can go to Russia. We can look at that on your behalf. How do we leverage into the countries where we know the criminals are, where the infrastructure is, what levers can we pull using Interpol channels? And this comes back to why Interpol is becoming more operationally focused. I can't lead that operation. I can't tell a country what to do, but we're able to then go into those countries effectively if we have the data sets. So coming back to Mr. Uche in Nigeria. 2018, he started their national cybercrime unit in a shipping container, 3 of them. Last week, I was in Nigeria and he took me to his new building. 4 stories in the diplomatic section of Abuja, about 95 staff, all police officers. In order to come into his team, you have to go through a boot camp. The last selection process he had was 140. He took 20. Going around their premises, because as a director of cybercrime Interpol, you get to travel and you get to go see things. It's the first centre I've seen in Africa, and even Southeast Asia as well, to a degree, where they had the labs, they had a training room, they had a threat intel room. They're actually doing monitoring for the government against government systems. Is that a law enforcement responsibility or is that a national cert responsibility? However, Mr. Uche has a problem. He has a challenge. In Nigeria, you have lots of different agencies. You have the Economic Crime Commission, you have the National Financial Intelligence Unit, all with different mandates. So what I was able to do was bring all those people around the table and say, okay, how can we be more effective in Nigeria in countering cybercrime? And they've been really, really effective. They've gone after the criminals. But when you're working in this environment, we were having to support them to fly to go and arrest people because they didn't have the resources. They were having to go out with armed guards. You know, they're armed all the time as well because the criminal groups think nothing of shooting the police officers. But the disruptions they have done, we've seen a significant drop-off now in some of our activity. Are we going to stop it? No, we're reducing it. But the harm that they're committing is global. But that's project funded. That will finish next year. Potentially, my staff will finish. We'll have to downscale our operation in Africa. That's the reality of running a global cybercrime program. You've got to manage those budgets. You've got to allocate those resources effectively. And at some times, you have to make some quite tough decisions about, okay, well, where are we going to go? So let's come across to America. What does that look like? Very big continent. You have Ameripol, who cover sort of Central Latin sort of America, and they are building a cybercrime centre based on the EC3, the European Cybercrime Centre, the EU. They like that model. They want to build their own one. Now, where the EU works, or the EC3 works very well, the European Centre in The Hague, is they're part of the European Union. They're part of a political entity. They have very clear funding. They're very well staffed. They trust. They have a lot of other countries then coming in working directly with them. So here in America, they want to build the same thing. What we were able to do as Interpol then is help influence where they were going to base their centre in Buenos Aires, where we have a regional bureau. So Ameripol, as an entity, want to have their own centre. That's great. We will dock in with them. We will allow them access to our tools and platforms because they've signed an agreement with the Argentinian Federal Police. And this took about a year of negotiation to get through. So when you look at building that model out, Africa's taken us since 2019, and we've built out a pretty effective model now in Africa. But again, as I said, the funding side of that might shrink back down. So the sustainability of this is only as good normally as the money that we have effectively. This is not me saying, oh, woe is me, we don't have any money. That's the reality of this. When you look at the cybersecurity industry and the amount of money that's been made in cybersecurity, and, you know, there is a lot of good work going on there where they are protecting and they are looking to reduce and they are looking to protect communities. But actually, how do they then impact and how do they support policing? So coming back to Argentina and Buenos Aires, we're building out now with them, with the government, a centre in Buenos Aires. We will be supporting that, and we're modelling it on the Africa one, but it will be different. It won't be the same because you're working in different cultures, you're working in different regions. We'll then be able to tie that in with the Caribbean region, America and the US as well. But is that model really effective that we have as Interpol working in 4 regions? Looking at the current geopolitical landscape, it's not effective. So we're shifting our strategy now to say, okay, what are the regional bodies or organisations out there that are able to work effectively already? How do we dock into those? So you have the United Nations, you have the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, you have the global GCC in the Middle East. I can't, all these acronyms, sorry, sometimes you can't remember them, but the regional body there. So what we're starting to do now is focusing in on those regional bodies because most of them are concerned about cybercrime as well. So how do we start leveraging off those bodies and building out that system with them more effectively? So we've had to sort of navigate that path. In terms of the geopolitics, 2021, Russia Federation put through a resolution at the United Nations. They put it through previously, actually, and they said, we want to have a new international convention to counter the use of information and communications technology for criminal purposes. I think that's the right title. Effectively, what they were saying is we need to have some definition around cybercrime. So a lot of the UN language is ICT, the use of ICT. It's not cybercrime. You'll hear this referred to, this convention, as the new cybercrime convention. So effectively, since 2021, and it was due to finish January, February this year, they were negotiating with the United Nations a new global crime convention. It's the first international crime convention in 20 years for law enforcement. And what they're going to put in there is the language. So we'll have a common language globally for law enforcement about definition of cybercrime. Will it be perfect? No. We've got other conventions such as the Budapest Convention, the Malibu Convention, and these are conventions that have been pulled together regionally to try and put sort of some framework around cybercrime, building out capabilities, capacities, and operations in countries. July, August time now, we've got an extra session. So for 2 weeks at a time, I lead the delegation on Interpol. We've been to Vienna and New York. It sounds very glamorous, but when you're sat in a hall like this, from 10 o'clock till 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, 7 to 10 o'clock, listening to people negotiating about the wording, it's not quite that glamorous. But where it has been really good is we set out 4 priorities at the beginning of this process. So as Interpol, we have observer status of the United Nations. So we're able to be involved in these sessions. So we set out 4 priorities that we felt law enforcement globally needed in that convention. The first one was prioritizing cybercrime in your country. So making sure we put the priority into law enforcement capability and capacity. The second one was don't duplicate. Use the tools and platforms that are already there and enhance those platforms, such as Interpol. Third one, capability and capacity, bridge the gap. So let's see how do we flatten out our triangle effectively. And the last one was public-private partnerships, working with the private sector. So at this moment in time, we've got 3 out of those 4, from our point of view, into the convention. The private sector one, you may not be surprised to hear this, from the government side of things, that is not quite in the convention at the moment. But at least the private sector were involved and are involved in those negotiations. So coming back to a dummy's guide to running a global cybercrime program, you go from the United Nations to Africa, back to Singapore, worrying about budgets of 100,000 euros, things like that. It's a really wide piece that myself and my team are dealing with effectively. Also at the United Nations at the moment, there's another process. Has anybody heard of the Open-Ended Working Group, First Committee? So this is a more political one. This is running from 2021 to 2025, and that's looking at cyber security. Cybercrime on one hand, this is looking at cyber security. And this is looking about the rules and norms and things like that. You know, how should countries operate in that space? Because to be honest, when you look at some of the acts that go on from country to country, and these are some of my personal opinions as well, but some of those attacks, if you did those in a physical sense, you know, the countries will almost be at war. So that cyberspace, they're trying to regulate that at the United Nations. In December at the session, they spoke about the threats posed within that, and cybercrime started being referenced. You remember at the start I spoke about cyber being a national security threat? The countries are now saying cybercrime is a national security threat. So that then allowed me as the director of the programme to say, we can now be involved in that process. So on Friday, there's a ministerial roundtable at the United Nations, and we're looking at capacity building. So again, we're able to navigate our way through that as Interpol and provide the support that's needed to help build out those capabilities and capacity. So coming back to Africa, looking at what we've done there in terms of operations. And please have a look on our website, look under Interpol Cybercrime Operations, you'll see all the information on there. But one of the pieces we did in the surge activity was, again, looking at infrastructure in Africa, looking at the compromise on the ISP side of things, looking at the cyber criminals, and we did a surge activity. So we brought all the countries together to do trainings. We put the data sets on our secure platforms, not using Gmail or not using WhatsApp anymore. They pulled those data sets off there. They went and actioned that. They then pushed the data back on. We then pull the data back out, and that then helps us aggregate it. So that's one of our really important roles here. Historically, in law enforcement, we said, we need loads of data. We need all that information. And then we tried to build the systems and tools to manage that data. And it became quickly apparent that lots of law enforcement were doing that in lots of little pockets. So for me, where we are, I don't want to receive lots of data. I want to receive that sort of top point there where a criminal infrastructure has been identified, a network's been identified. So coming back to Lockbit, my home agency, the National Crime Agency, they have all that data and they're wading their way through it. They're sharing that out with countries that they work effectively with and have been, Five Eyes, Europe, probably about 40 to 50 countries. But there'll be another 150 countries there where potentially that data will then reside on the floor. And by that, I mean it won't be shared because we're still not set up and we're still not sharing effectively at that moment in time. We're seeing that cyber element and country element and that national interest overriding the needs of the communities and preventing crime. So my ask, and I'll continue to do it to my agency, right, give us those data sets, we will manage that. We will take the victim sets, we will go to those countries, we will go to them with their law enforcement agency. We will look to protect the victims in those countries. Give us the infrastructure, we'll look to disrupt that infrastructure, but also give us those threat actors as well, and we'll look to arrest them, or the countries will. So again, I'll keep knocking on the door. I'll keep looking to try and bring that information in because my role is to protect communities. So some of the things that we have here on our threat response side is, I said, working with private partners. So we're able to receive data sets from private partners, and it's phenomenal. They're data sets that I would not normally see at a national level. We then put them out as cyber activity reports. So during the World Cup in Qatar, we had 2 work streams going on. We were receiving data sets from the private partners about cybersecurity aspects around the World Cup, and we put that into the national certs, or the criminal groups that we were seeing active. As a result of some of those operations, again, we identified criminal networks who were using stolen credit cards to buy tickets, who were doing all sorts of things. And again, those are now led into operational actions and activities. We're going to be doing the same for the Paris Olympics, and we've already seen data sets there, which we've pushed into France, and they haven't seen those data sets previously. So again, that aggregated value of Interpol being able to work into any member country is, phenomenal. We do threat assessments, so we've just done the Africa threat assessment, we'll be doing a global threat assessment, and these are really important in terms of tools that countries can then use to help build out capabilities. We have different prevention and disruption strategies. We run global awareness programs. We do all manners of trainings with countries as well. And then they look at the intelligence opportunities for operations, which we can then put into our operational desks. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm just going to sort of touch on a few other bits here as well, and then we'll open it for Q&A. So under the strategy side, we have different projects. We have projects funded from the US, the Cyber Capabilities and Capacity Development Project, a very catchy title. And that's building out awareness and training about malware analysis. It's around how you investigate, how you use virtual currencies, how do criminals use virtual currencies, how you could disrupt that, and that's been done in Southeast Asia. That will then tie into our operational desk as we start up the operational desk as well. GLACE-E is based on the Budapest Convention, so we provide the law enforcement element training into that. So it's a wider project than just law enforcement. It looks at the whole countries who wants to accede to the Budapest Convention. They have to hit certain milestones within that. We provide the law enforcement training. The ISPA project I said about, so that's the support to the African Union, and the Cyber Foundation project, that helped paid for all our tools effectively, which are now available to all our member countries. But we built sustainability into that. So we had the funding, we recognized we need to turn that into a sustainable model. We then put that into our core budget. So the tools are now available forever for the member countries to use those platforms. An important stage where we are as well is on that global stage. Partnerships against cybercrime. Has anybody heard of the Atlas project? Oh. Well, someone did the other night. I was talking to someone at a cocktail reception, and she's OSINT from Australia. And I didn't say what I was, what I did, and I just talked about it. We said, oh yeah, I'm really excited about it. We're involved in the Atlas. And I was like, well, the Atlas. So 2021, we did a report with the World Economic Forum about partnerships against cybercrime, about what could industry do more of. And sometimes industry is quite reluctant to work with law enforcement. So our Gateway initiative is a direct involvement with Interpol. So Microsoft, Fortinet, the Cyber Threat Alliance, Accenture, and a few others came together, and they're now forming an entity, and the entity is under the World Economic Forum. And what we said to them is, okay, well, let's look at 4 crime types: ransomware, business email compromise, carding forums, and enabling infrastructure. Now look through open source at the 4 main groups globally, and then we'll look at the interaction and where are those interlockers across that. Currently, at the moment, we have operations in Africa, Asia, South Pacific, where we're using those data sets, which have been provided to us by the Atlas Initiative. So coming back to how you build a program out, sometimes you have to get down into the weeds, write the papers, but you can turn that into tangible outcomes. And this is one which, I'm really proud that we've done with the World Economic Forum, and that will continue to grow. Counter-ransomware initiative. Who's heard of a counter-ransomware initiative? Oh, well, I've got a couple of hands. Brilliant. IST did a report. They had the ransomware task force set up in the US. They produced a fantastic report. That report would have sat on the shelf. A week after that report was produced, the Colonial Pipeline attack happened. High interest, high impact. Politicians were involved. All of a sudden, the US started bringing and collaborating, bringing everything together. The counter-ransomware initiative was born out of that. So it has 3 pillars to it: a policy pillar, 50+ countries, Interpol are part of it as well. Policy pillar, looking at different policies countries can employ to counter ransomware. You've got capacity building, which is led by Nigeria, diplomacy led by Germany, and then international counter-ransomware task force led by Australia. And that one is looking about how can they coordinate more effectively on the operational activities. It's not operational, it's not allowed to be, But as partners such as Interpol, we can feed into that. So we've sort of run around the world effectively, and we come back to Interpol. So our role is to help reduce the global impact of cybercrime and protect communities for a safer world. I'm a law enforcement official. That's my role. I've done it for nearly 40 years. I retire in August. So, I believe in Interpol and everything it tries to do. I think we still have challenges with countries and how they interact with Interpol. The geopolitics massively impact that and will continue to do so. But that's the reality of the environment we live in. Thank you very much for your attention. Happy to open the floor now for Q&As. I think we've got about 5 minutes. Any questions at all? I will be open and honest. Oh, no questions. Oh. Microphone. Sorry, I should have said there's a microphone there. Do you want to walk over to the microphone? Oh, I didn't do that slide, sorry. Had to put that one in.
I thought it was worth asking one question at least, if no one else was going to. You mentioned the UN and the difficulty with public-private initiatives.
Yeah.
Just hoping you could talk a little bit more about that. I'm embedded in NCFTA from your home organisation, and I find it fantastic, the public-private. I guess most people here are private industry, and it would probably be quite good to understand why that's more difficult.
Yeah, I think we build up personal relationships. It comes back to that trust. At different levels, you have to build that trust model out. And I was speaking on it about a panel yesterday about what those different ecosystems look like. And when you are working in the global environment, there's a lot of duplication that goes on as well in countries. So certainly with the private sector, you've got to show that value. What's the return on investment? The United Nations have a thing called the Sustainable Development Goals, and there's a cyber one in there. A lot of companies now do ESG reporting, environmental, social and governance. So it's to show their shareholders, their worth effectively. And the way I sell it around Interpol or working with law enforcement is, you have that data set. It's a different policing model because they as the community, or you as a community, see what's really going on out there. We as law enforcement don't. But when you look at Microsoft, they've got a digital crimes unit, they've got a diplomacy team, they're an international entity with great capabilities and capacity. They can carry out their own investigations, their own disruptions through civil courts and things like that. But sometimes you do need that hand put on someone's shoulder and arrested and taken off the street effectively. And that does work, and it does work in cyber as well. But also on the disruption side, on the financial, is the follow the money thing, and let's take the money off them. But we have to show that worth back to the private sector about what is their responsibility in the society as well. And then you've got the government level on that as well. So we're seeing a lot more coming together now in different initiatives, but then you also see different regulations coming out. So the SEC thing about mandated reporting, in the UK we have the Information Commissioner's Office and the mandated reporting there. It's sometimes difficult because sometimes companies may not have that necessary security. They get breached, then they might get treated as an offender as well. So there's that balancing act in all of that. Any more questions? Yeah, please.
On a scale of 1 to 5, in terms of Interpol's priorities, on a scale of 1 to 5, where do you see cybercrime?
That's a great question.
Yes.
I see it as number 1.
Yes. Okay.
Obviously.
Yes.
If you asked me if my funding has increased in the last 5 years from core funding, no.
Okay.
Have we increased our funding through going out and getting projects in? Yes.
Okay.
So certain countries will fund externally into Interpol, but I think just on the prioritisation side of it, and I'm saying, when we're dealing with counter-terrorism, we're dealing with human trafficking, we're dealing with child abuse online, everything like that, there's so much that we're dealing with effectively on so many different levels. And I think it's like that elephant. Where do you start eating the elephant? You start a small piece at a time, but that prioritisation piece in any programme. So we've got about 89 activities, and we're looking at high harm, high impact, high volume, high interest cybercrime.
Yeah.
So we try and work out, okay, where do we put our resources into effectively as well?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
On the flip side of the public-private,
Yeah.
do you have some good tangible advice for kind of enterprises in working with Interpol and things that they can do to make investigations easier and just build those tight relationships?
Yeah, so we always talk on a national basis, engaging with your law enforcement in the first instance, making sure that, you know, if there is a breach or something like that, it's reported. At least it's reported, because that's one of the big challenges we've had is the underreported. Because it's not reported, there's not a problem. We do things like expert attachment. So we have some of the cybersecurity teams coming in and working with us for like 3 months at a time. We might do a sprint or something like that. So yeah, there's different ways that you can engage with Interpol, but also part of it is about saying, look, there is a global cybercrime program out there. This is what it's doing or trying to do, and that awareness thing, that's part of my role, is to do that awareness piece as well and share, and you know, look at the Interpol website, look at what we're doing, see how you can contribute on there as well.
Thank you. You guys have an incredible challenge globally with all the geopolitics and everything else out there. Which countries are the most difficult that you find to work with? I mean, we see that, you know, a lot of attacks come from China, Russia, North Korea, obviously. And they say, yes, we're going to do something, and we don't see anything on their end. Is there any progress that you guys are seeing working with some of those places?
Yeah, so within my team, I have an assistant director from the US, I have an assistant director from China, I have people from Germany, I have someone from the Iranian cybercrime unit in my team in Singapore. In order to leverage into those countries, I need the data sets. And that's a challenge that we have still at the moment. So we're seeing improvement, but a lot more could be done in that space. And we're able to act as that neutral interlocker in that space and push into those countries. And I've got the stop sign going up now. So I'll be going out the back. If any more questions, please grab me. And thank you very much.